Hi, I'm Emunah Wolf, and this is my history. I've always wanted to know how we got from these people, my great-great-grandparents David and Fredel, to this. My aunt once made a paper cut of our family tree. I've always seen it hanging and read the names, but never thought much into their stories. I recently called up my grandparents on my father's side and asked them to tell me all about it. Let's start at the very beginning of my grandmother's family. My great-grandmother Rivka was raised in Sosnovich, and my great-grandfather Max in Stremisus. They lived really close to each other, nowadays about a 15-minute car ride away, so they met and fell in love. They wanted to move to Israel together, but it didn't work out. They weren't able to get married before the Nazis came and took them to separate concentration camps, Marxkat and Blechheimer. Thank God they both survived the horrible conditions. While in the camps, they never would have believed that they both would live to, or almost to, the age of 90 and have many, many descendants. Max found shelter in a deserted building with the only other live member of his family, his sister Hannah. From there, he went back to where he had been living before the war, Sosnovich. When he arrived, he saw his long-lost fiancée, and they were finally and tearfully reunited. They both had no place to go and no money to spend, so they ended up in the Bergen-Belsen DP camp, in what is now Lower Saxony, Germany. In the year following liberation in Bergen-Belsen, there were 6 to 7 marriages per day. My great-grandparents Max and Rivka got married there by a man named Rabbi Helfgott, who had been a prisoner of war and wrote Jewish marriage contracts from memory. This is an actual picture of the first marriage contract he wrote in Bergen-Belsen by hand. This is their own marriage contract that my grandfather still has, and this is their actual wedding invitation. When they had acquired some money, they decided to move to Israel. They sold everything they had and put all their money towards 2 boat tickets. They were very excited to start a new life together, away from Europe. The night before the boat set sail, Rivka woke up screaming. She said that she had a dream that the boat sunk after 3 days of sailing. She refused to get on, but told Max that he could if he wanted to. He told her that he would never leave her, and sure enough, after 3 days of sailing, a German ship sunk the boat that they were supposed to be on. They were relieved and stayed in Bergen-Belsen until they had acquired a bit more money. They found out that Rivka had an aunt in Canada, and she sponsored them to move to Toronto. Nowadays, the flight would take about 11 hours, but it took a much longer time for them. They went on a propeller plane in 1948, when my grandmother was 8 months old, but they stopped in many places along the way because planes in those days needed to stock up on fuel quite often. On to my grandfather's side, which we know a lot about. My grandfather's great-grandfather, Nachum Lipa, was the head of a yeshiva in Varna, Lithuania. He had some kids, including Yitzchak Tzvi Hananya. He made them all immigrate when they were teenagers in 1915, because he felt that other places would be safer for them. He moved to England, where they changed his name to Isaac Harry Cannon. His cousins moved elsewhere, and their names were changed to other things. Hanania was changed to Cantor, Shinani, and a few other similar variations. Isaac Harry married a woman that he met in England named Toba Fagi Cannon, née Steinberg, and they had children in Gateshead, one of whom was my great-grandmother, Pearlie Cannon. My grandfather's great-great-grandmother's name was Pesha Rachel, and she was from Rzepnik, Poland. Her son Yitzchak Gershon Wolf also moved to England and got married there to a woman named Chaya Wolf, née Finkelstein. There were no emails in those days, and after some years they lost touch with her. They assumed she had died and started naming their children after her, something that only happens after someone has passed away in Ashkenaz Jewry. When she was 104 years old, she managed to regain contact with him and got pretty upset that he just assumed she had died. Anyways, Yitzchak Gershon Wolf had 10 children in Manchester, including my great-grandfather, who was in the British Army when the Nazis were bombing England. He met my great-grandmother and they got married in 1943 in a wedding hall in Manchester. In 1944, they had my great-uncle Neville, and in 1947, they had my grandfather David. They flew to Canada in 1950 on Trans-Canada Airlines because my great-grandfather had a sister who moved here first. When they first lived here, they lived in downtown Toronto. There they had one last child in 1956, a girl named Faggy. So now my grandparents are both in Canada. But how did they meet? My grandmother was part of B'nai Akiva, and she had a friend that she would call every week on Tuesdays named Barry. One week he wasn't able to call and asked my grandfather, his best friend, if he could call her and tell her that Barry was not able to call. They ended up talking for an hour and arranged to talk every Wednesday without Barry knowing. 6 months later, they all went to B'nai Akiva event, and afterwards, all the people went to my grandmother's house to hang out. She was talking to both of them, but slowly began talking to my grandfather more than Barry. Barry put 2 and 2 together and realized his mistake. My grandparents started dating and finally got engaged. At their wedding, Barry went up to them and shouted in front of everybody, "It should have been me!" My grandparents were very embarrassed, but they ended up having 5 children: Chavi, Zahava, Tzvi, Yitzi, and my father, Ari. My father and mother met at NCSY, got married, and had me. There you go. That's my history.